Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, as you know, the midterms are tomorrow. You know what that means. We are 2 days from the official start of the 2024 presidential election. Right now, it looks pretty likely we're going to get the rematch that absolutely no one asked for, Trump versus Biden, the sequel. It's one of the clearest signs of our societal and democratic decline that two men with negative approval ratings that a majority of the country says really clearly that they do not want, those two dudes very likely to be the major party standard bearers. But while that outcome is likely, it's far from predetermined. We already covered Trump preparing to announce shortly after the midterms, taking shots at likely rival DeSantis. There's some things going on the Democratic side of the ledger too, though, that might cause one to question whether Biden is in fact going to end up being the Democratic pick once again. So first of all, dude hasn't been doing so well in the public eye lately. As we covered last week in a recent appearance, Biden misidentified the war that we're currently involved in, and then seconds later misstated how his own son died again. Take a look at that.
And they talk about inflation. You know, we're dealing with it for a whole second. Inflation is a worldwide problem right now because of a war in Iraq and the impact on oil and what Russia's doing. The war in Ukraine. And thinking of Iraq because that's where my son died. Because he died.
Even more noteworthy than yet another Biden stumble, however, was the fact that the New York Times, which is basically a mouthpiece for elite opinion, actually covered those stumbles. One of their most prominent reporters, Chief White House correspondent Peter Baker, he wrote a piece highlighting those brain malfunctions. This came at the same time that George Will, a conservative establishment fixture for decades, wrote a scathing column begging Democrats not to stick with Biden or his failed vice president, Kamala Harris. Will wrote in that column, regarding Biden and Harris, the National Democratic Party faces two tests of stewardship. Its imprimatur cannot again be bestowed on either one of them. Biden has not just passed his prime, even adequacy is in his past, and this is Harris's prime. Ouch. Now, there is one more to add to this list of elite critiques of Biden. Reuters has a reported piece out asking whether major midterm losses are going to lead to Democrats pulling the plug on the current president. The article begins quite provocatively. They write, the U.S. midterm elections on Tuesday will do much more than shape the next 2 years of Joe Biden's presidency. They'll help determine whether he will run in 2024 as well, political analysts and advisors believe. They then go on to report on the efforts of a few blue state governors to position themselves for the possibility Biden decides not to run after all, namely California's Gavin Newsom, Illinois' J.B. Pritzker, and apparently New Jersey's Phil Murphy. Okay. They also have a bunch of quotes from named and anonymous analysts questioning whether Biden is really the party's best choice for the future. Now, these articles are only interesting in that they give us a little glimpse into a Washington insider game of jockeying and of leaking. Basically, what these articles all signal is that the party donors and elites do not want Biden to be the nominee again. Now, these types have frankly always kind of underestimated Biden. They look down on him for his lack of educational pedigree and for a political style that leans into retail and gut instinct over the overly intellectual stylistic approach of, say, an Obama or a Pete. Ironically, they actually look down on Biden for some of his more compelling characteristics rather than any of the actual policy issues with him. But this set of party elites would prefer the Silicon Valley-connected Gavin Newsom or their real wet dream, the McKinsey-credentialed Pete Buttigieg. Now, this whole dynamic of elites unsure of Biden, it does have a bit of a deja vu quality to it. In the run-up to the 2020 Dem primary, there were similar questions about Biden's fitness and capability to lead the party into the modern era. Typically, a former vice president would be seen as a clear heir apparent, would more or less be able to clear the nominating field. Instead, Biden's perceived weakness led to a record-breaking number of candidates, everyone from outsiders to insiders to ladder climbers to people we had never heard of and really haven't heard from since. It's easy to forget now, but at the time, you were even allowed to question whether Biden's age had caught up with him. Remember this?
He wanted every single person in this country covered. My plan would do that. Your plan would not.
They do not have to buy in. They do not have to buy in.
You just said that. You just said that 2 minutes ago. You just said 2 minutes ago that they would have to buy in. You said they would have to buy in.
Have to buy in. If she qualifies for Medicaid,
are you forgetting what you said 2 minutes ago?
Be in for it.
But ultimately, when it came down to it, political, donor, and media elites underestimated Biden and wildly overestimated the bench that they had imagined to be stacked with talent and with appeal. As their would-be replacements were rejected one by one by the American public, they were finally, at the last minute, faced with the reality that their only chance to keep Bernie from being the nominee was to go all in for Biden. As Biden's own wife once put it, to suck it up and vote Joe. Now, if I had to guess, I'd say we're going to see a similar process play out. If the midterms result in the red wave that looks pretty likely at this point, expect a whole lot more articles like this. CNN and MSNBC, they're going to lift their moratorium on discussing Biden's mental acuity. Leaks are going to fly. Anonymous Dem consultants will savage Biden. Aides to Pete, Newsom, and others are going to plant lots of negative Biden stories. Polls will flood the field, revealing once again that Democrats would love to nominate someone other than Joe Biden. And then eventually, reality will set in once again for these elites. Reality that the elected Dem bench is even less popular than Biden. Reality that as addled as Biden may be, he didn't spend all his life chasing the brass ring just to give it up because some donor types are thirsting after Mayor Pete. Reality that even in their fantasy world, where Biden willingly steps aside, Dems then have to grapple with the fact that they can't just push aside the first black female vice president for a cast of governor white guys without facing a wave of shrieking about racism and sexism. Just like last time, almost instantaneously, the media will shift from questioning Biden to uncritical flattery. They'll close ranks hard and try to snuff out any outsiders who consider challenging Biden in the primary without the party blessing. But even after elites circle the wagons, one problem for Biden will still remain. And that's the hard fact that the Democratic base desperately wants other options. And that base, after having seen the weakness of Biden's electability argument with a midterm shellacking, and after a few more years of mainstream media weakening and alternative media strengthening, they might not be as easily corralled this time around as they were last time. For Biden, the people, not Dem elites, are the real threat. Saagar, I saw this morning, Jen saw cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.